Today we're going to be freshening up the rotors and the calipers on my Mercedes, which recently did a trip from the desert where the rotors and calipers started looking great to the frozen north to Maine over the winter, where we drove in enough salt to pick up some really unsightly rust. So we're going to take care of that to bring this back to proper desert spec. Okay, friends and neighbors, this is what we're starting with. This is the what my car looked like getting it back from a road trip to the northeast. Normally it's in Arizona, so it doesn't see this kind of nonsense, but hopefully we'll be able to show you a dramatic improvement over this crusty, nasty, rusty condition when we're done with this job. Okay, before we get too far along, we want to make sure and take off the brake wear sensor here, which is a T10 external Torx. So that has to come out. Very simple. Just remove the bolt, because you're not going to want to be stressing this cable, or you're going to be buying a new sensor. Okay, and when it's loose, you just reach in and pull the little sensor. It's just a little metallic piece that senses whenever the brake pad is too far worn. Okay, working on the top bolt. First step is to separate the caliper from the caliper mount, which I'm doing by holding the flats with a 22 millimeter. You can use an adjustable wrench or just a slip joint pliers. And I'm using a fairly large socket, ratchet rather, to actually turn it, because it has been sealed with blue Loctite, so it will fight you. So take it off. It'll just leave some time to do it. Okay, now that the caliper itself is loose, give it a little bit of a squeeze to compress the pistons. Just turn it sideways. You can see it moving very slightly. You just need enough to be able to slide it off. Shouldn't be too tight. And then you want to tie it up to the suspension to keep it out of trouble and to keep from stressing out the brake line, because if you mess up your brake line, then you're going to be off to the parts store and without a car for a couple days. Okay, next step, we need to get this mount off, which is held in place with two T30s on the back, and they're going to be tight, so get ready for some violence. All right, once they break, they should get loose pretty quick. Remove the little extra screw here that holds the rotor in place. It's a T30. And at that point, your rotor should be free. And this little heat shield here really isn't too bad, but you know, it is scraped up a little bit. It's taken a little abuse, so I'm going to pull it off, clean it up, and paint it as well. So that's again, we're back to the 10 external socket to remove the 3 bolts holding it on. Now, to be honest, I hadn't considered doing anything with the basically the knuckle itself, the steering knuckle. But boy, is that corroded. That looked a whole lot better before this winter trip, so I believe that's going to come out as well. Again, I need to just clean it up a little bit. I'm not going to worry too much about going too crazy. I just want it to look a little bit better. I'm worried about show car or Concours kind of accuracy here, but just get it cleaned up enough where it won't corrode as badly next time. And the first step is going to be to pull out the wheel speed sensor, because you don't want to bugger that up. It should be real easy to get out. And it's a good time to check the condition, make sure there's no unusual contacts with anything else and that the bore looks clean. And if not, you want to clean that up. Shot a PB blaster on each of these. I'm using a 20mm wrench to hold the nut and a breaker bar with my T18 to remove them. They will be tight. Once you get them loose, you can use my little driver or a regular ratchet to take them the rest of the way off. Alright, after just using a cheap wire brush around the periphery of the head here, got the worst of the rust off. That both preps the surface for paint and makes for a better mating surface for your wheel, which is actually very important. So make sure you get any little bumps of rust or any other thing off. The next step is to do the backside. Now obviously this doesn't show, so again, you're not going to have to get a show car finish on this. This is not really going to matter much. You do want to get this inside surface clean for the same reason, to get a good mating surface with your hub. But I'm just going to knock the worst of it off, and then we will be painting it just to keep it from rusting as much. Again, it doesn't really matter, but you'll rest better knowing it's safe. Okay, next I'm going to do a light brushing on these surfaces here, which will be more difficult. You can brace if you have a vise, or you can set this between a couple wheels or tires rather, or you can just hold it in your knees and do it. But okay, not a show car job, but you can see that I got at least the immediate edge of this clean. There's still rust down inside here. Nothing really you can do about that. I don't really care anyway. But I'm going to give it a light coating of paint there around the edge and on the hat. And now you don't really have to worry too much about getting paint on the braking surface itself. The first application of your brakes is going to take that right off. At the same time, I don't want to overdo it either, so I'm going to be at least a little bit careful to minimize that. But generally, it won't matter a bit, and I'll show you the results after the brakes are applied, after the end of the video, so you can see what happens. Okay, I'm going to apply a little bit of brake cleaner. I'm going to spray it on the rag itself and wipe over. You can spray it all over the caliper itself, and it'll use a whole lot more product and won't really do a better job. So just wipe down the surfaces. I've done this with a lot less prep than this, and it generally works just fine. So those of you who are a little pedantic and want to tell me that I'm not prepping enough, you're absolutely right. But in the end, This is a daily driver. This won't matter a bit. It won't really affect the longevity either. Okay, this is now about ready for paint. So what I'm going to use, I've used regular paint before, but I'm gonna just spend a couple extra bucks here and get caliper paint. This, you can see, it's good to 900 degrees. This is going on a brake rotor. I'm easy on brakes. I'm not the guy who rides my brakes down a mountain, but in the event that this brake rotor ever does get really hot, I don't want the paint to bubble off, so I'm going to use the right stuff. Now I'm going to commence to shaking this can for about a minute. That's important. Do it. Okay, normally you'll want to put the paint down in thin coats to keep it from running. Again, it's not going to matter a whole lot on the backside here, but I'm going to try to do a decent job anyway. You can see I'm trying not to get too much on the rotor itself, on the braking surface, and getting some down inside the fins inside between the two rotor plates. Okay, and the next step, that's really about good enough for that. I'm going to spray in here so that I get, so that basically this won't be the first thing that rusts out, obviously. And again, just getting lots of paint down inside between the two plates. And you can see it already looks better. And with any luck, that'll stay that way for a good long time. Okay, good enough. Now I should be able to start painting the top hat. And here's where you want to be a little bit more careful. This part's actually going to show. So again, try to put it down in thin, even coats instead of trying to get it all done in one pass, because you're likely to get runs, which you just don't want. You don't want to be looking at that every time you look at your car. And look at the otherwise great job you did, but trust me, you're just going to notice the run if you get one on there. So you let this dry for a couple minutes. I don't have to let it dry quite as long here in Arizona because it's already, everything's dry. The paint's probably dry on the way to the hub. So just keep spraying and let it dry a couple minutes and put a second coat on. Shield itself, it cleaned up well enough. I've got a little further to go, but you can see that really the only paint problem here is just a little scuffing. I'm just going to use some regular black shiny paint. I won't bother using the flat black exhaust system caliper paint on that because it's just overkill. So I'll spray that now. And about 10 seconds later, it looks as good as new, or it certainly will when it's installed. You only see the very outside edge. So I'll go ahead and clean up a little bit more around the outside and call this part done. I'm going to start cleaning up the hub first. Again, this doesn't show at all, but let's try to get a good clean surface for mating to the inside of the wheel. And next I'm going to start using the wire wheel to knock off some of the crud on the knuckle. I think this will clean up pretty nicely. I'm debating on whether I need to paint it at all after I do this. I'm thinking what I'm going to do, if I can get it looking pretty good and kind of back to its German glory to start with, which it looks like it's going to polish up just fine. I think I may just hit it with a little bit of clear just to prevent this from happening so quickly the next time. I got the hub reasonably clean. Again, it's invisible. I don't want to go too crazy on that. I may spray it with a little coat of just black regular paint, really any color paint, and just to reduce the amount it's likely to rust in the future. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the rest of the knuckle, see how it comes out. All right, I'm pretty happy with the way that came out. Again, there's no structural issue with that oxidation on top. It doesn't really matter. So I cleaned up the parts that are going to show and a few that don't. And I think that actually looks better than if I tried to paint it and make it look like Boy Racer was working on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with a little clear poly, which should be just enough to keep it from oxidizing and hopefully protect it from the next layer of salt. Should I expose this poor suffering car to that next winter. So again, a little light coat, and it's clear, so I'm not going to really worry about masking anything off or getting it someplace it doesn't belong because it's invisible. So the only problem might be my driveway may shed water here better than other places. So all right, so little coating of clear and I should be good to go. And I'll go ahead and give my hub the same thing just for grins. Okay, so there we go. This dries in 15 minutes in normal circumstances, which in desert speak means about 3.5 minutes. So now, while that's drying, I'll start doing the same to my caliper. Now again, my initial thought was to paint the calipers, but you know, I like the stock clean look of the burnished metal when it was new, so I'm gonna clean these up and see how they look, and may just do exactly the same thing to them or paint them. We'll all find out in a couple minutes. All right, I'm wiggling the knuckle back around to get it lined up. I'm going to use a wrench in between the CV axle and the strut body, just to get the holes lined up, get one of them lined up, and then rock the other one back into place. You can see that just makes it really easy. So a little bit of grease on the bolts, always a good idea, even in the desert. Get it lined up, put it through. I'll go ahead and put the other one through. Once I get that one in, gives me a way to pivot it. Put the nuts back on, and we'll have this buttoned up and won't have to worry about it. Make it easier to work on the brake. I released the strain relief back here. This little rubber washer here, if I can find it. There it is. This little rubber washer goes in here, so just force it out. That gives you a lot more movement. Allows you to bring your caliper around. Let me go a little wider shot here, so that you can work on it. And again, I've got it hanging by a bungee just to keep it from straining the brake line any too much. So I'm going to just clean this up and see what it looks like. Again, I'm going to have to be very careful not to bugger up the caliper pistons and the seals here. If I hit those with a grinder, it's rebuild time, and I don't really want to do that. So some of this won't matter too much because it's inside. It doesn't really show. I'll clean it up, but I don't have to worry about getting every little crevice and crack perfectly clean, because again, this is mainly about aesthetics. This as nasty as this looks, it doesn't hurt a thing. So let's see if we can get it cleaned up. I'm going to get once again use my wire brush and start on it, and then I'll do the mount. First little bit of this didn't work for some reason, but basically I'm removing this rust here is from the calipers. It has nothing to do with anything going on in the piston itself or in the inside the mount. That's just rust is being thrown out from the rotors, rusting in between the two plates inside those fins. So I just cleaned that up a little bit. But the main thing is I've been working on the outside here, and you can see it's looking a lot better, and it's going to get back to pretty much factory looking finish if I can clean up all this area. And if that's the case, I think I'll clear coat it, and rather than painting it, so that it looks like a new caliper instead of a painted caliper. So I'm going to continue cleaning this up. I'm going to use a combination of my motorized tool and things like just regular wire brush to get down inside the crevices here. I've got various different adapters for the drill so I can get into smaller areas. I'm going to move this bolt out of the way to keep it safe, and come back after I'm done cleaning it. Alright, it's looking pretty good. There's just a couple spots that are kind of hard to get to. Hit it with some brake cleaner to loosen it up. Alright, I'm not going to get all the rust off. It's just going to be kind of difficult to get down in there. Again, this is not going to show. I know you're getting tired of me saying that. But that's a pretty good job. I'm going to give a little bit of a shot of brake cleaner on the rest of this just to give me an idea of what I'm dealing with. I can see there's still a little more cleaning to do, but it is looking pretty good. So I'm going to keep on grinding. Okay, shaking my poly. It's good enough. I'll start on the back side and just give it a little bit of a light coat. And I'm trying not to get too much on the pistons themselves. I don't think it'll hurt any, a little bit won't hurt anything. And I'm just going to go over the entire caliper now, that body, and a little coat of clear. Including down in these nooks and crannies. That also ought to keep the rust from adhering as well, so the cleanup in the future should be easier. Alright, now I'm just going to let that dry, and we can start putting it back together. After I finish cleaning the mount, that is. And a little while later, you end up with something like this. Again, I didn't do show car job, but it's pretty darn clean. I got the clips cleaned up well enough. I got them back in. Now I'm just going to spray it with some clear, again, to keep it from corroding as fast or the rust sticking to it as bad. Okay. Also going to clean up the back of the brakes a little bit, just because you really want a good mechanical contact between the pistons and the brake pad. Okay, next step, let's put the rotor trim plate on, this backing plate. It's still got some blue Loctite on the bolts. Don't forget to tighten down the bolt holding the wheel speed sensor on, as that's a fairly necessary part of your car. All right, we're just about done there, ready to put the rotor on. And when you're doing this, make sure you line up the hole for the keeper bolt, the little screw that goes on, or you'll be pulling it back off to find where it goes. So line it up, stick it in, and get your Torx tool and tighten it down. And next you're going to want to slide your pads in, make sure your clips are in correctly. Slide the pads in so that the one that takes the sensor is toward the back, which is toward these the slider pins. And then the other one goes in the opposite, obviously. And of course, the pads facing inward where they'll touch the rotor. Now the other thing you can do here to save yourself some time is to get yourself a nice slip joint pliers, and you can grab the pistons, and you can see I'm compressing them just slightly. I've already done this, so they're in far enough. But basically, just a little gentle pressure will compress them in. You do have to be careful that your brake fluid reservoir isn't nearly full, or this could actually push enough fluid back up to overflow it and make a mess. You don't want to do that. I didn't have to push them very far. If you haven't added fluid, it shouldn't take it back above full. So that's a reason you really don't want to top your brake fluid reservoir off every time it's down just a little bit, because when you do compress the pistons, you'll overflow it. So now these are open. It's time to put this back on the mounts, and you can see I've got the bolts in place, so I just have to slide the mount back up and bolt it into place. Okay, get one started. And you notice how easily these slid over the rotor, so there's plenty of extra room there. Now slide the other one into place, tighten them down, and now I go get my ratchet and run this thing down to tight. And after that, you'll use your torque wrench, set to the proper torque, of course, to finish tightening these down. Okay, next step, because I got a little carried away pushing these in, is just make sure your pads are pretty snug up against the rotor, and then you're going to swing your caliper back into place over the pads and disconnect it from the bungee like that. So I have applied blue Loctite to the two bolts that go through the slider mounts. So the trick is just get it lined up, put in one of the bolts loosely to the point where you can get the other bolt lined up, which should be really easy to find. Turn it into place loosely. Okay, now just run these two down snug, and I'll probably have to capture the right, and I've got the 22mm on the flats, and I'm tightening down with the 15, and it's about as tight as it's going to get. So now I'm going to finish off with a torque wrench, and I'll be almost done here. And finally, clip in the strain relief on the brake wear, the pad wear sensor, and come around and place the, I've already got the bolt in place, and I put some grease on it just to keep it from ever seizing. And you want to get that started, and then this little guy here goes down on the pad like so. It clips in, so it's down inside that pad and that little niche that was designed for it. So basically, whenever your pad wears down to the point where there's nothing between that metal rod and this piece of metal here, it shorts this out and tells the system you need brakes. So listen to it when that happens, by the way. So now I'm just going to run this down tight. It's just a T10, and we'll start buttoning it up the rest of the way. And well, this is pretty much the end result. It looks 100 times better. I actually think that this particular caliper looks better in its original state than painted. The car's got a lot of miles on it, so it looks very appropriate. It looks like it's been kept in really good shape. The rotor is in much better shape. When I get the wheel on, I get it driven, and the braking section turns silver again. It'll look even better. So I'll be sure and take a quick shot of that before I publish this video. Okay, that's after the first drive to the dog park. And you can see the paint's almost burned off. It made some kind of strange noises and definitely felt odd the first couple times. So I'm sure that will continue for just a little bit. But it's looking good, and now the only thing remaining is to do the rears.